Hello and welcome to Uncommon Law, my podcast about true stories from my life experience of over 50 years as a lawyer and trial judge. This is a look at the law from the inside out, stuff they don't teach in law school. This is Judge Rudy Greco, retired Justice of the New York State Supreme Court. Writing a book is 10 times easier than getting the book published. That's really difficult. And Italian people have a saying that rhymes, and it says, fra dire a dare e mezza mare, which means from saying to doing is half an ocean. And they were absolutely right. It's easy to say, but it's hard to do. In the early to mid-'90s, I belonged to my local community organization, the Jackson Heights Beautification Group, which eventually I was the director, and eventually I served them twice as a president over the years. And the neighborhood was getting landmarked, and we were the principal, our organization was the principal force behind the landmarking effort. And one of our directors who became a president later on was a guy named Dan Karatzis, and he wrote a book which helped us enormously and helped our cause enormously. It's called Jackson Heights, A Garden in the City. It was a story about the history of our planned community, which Jackson Heights was. And I was inspired by Dan's book to write a children's history because I thought it would be a good way to encourage a sense of community, a sense of place, civic pride and activism in young people. And of course, the Marxists, the communists and the Jesuits all say the same thing. You give us the children in their formative years when they're very young, and we'll educate them and have them for life. And I thought this was a good way and a positive way to get our young people, our citizens, to be better people in their community. So the group, I proposed this to the group, to the board of directors, and they adopted it as a possible activity for the organization. I was named the chairman of the committee, and as chairman, I went around to try to assemble a group of volunteers of talented locals. And Jackson Heights is only 4 miles from Manhattan. It's a bedroom community for Manhattan, and as such, we have a surplus of creative people from business, the arts, you name it, publishing, all backgrounds, who live in Jackson Heights, may work in Manhattan, but live. They're all talented and nice people. So I started to assemble a group, and the first one I tried to do was, the first thing I tried to do was to get an author, somebody to write this thing. And I thought about a friend of mine and a neighbor, Claudia Solomon, who was a local school teacher who was born and raised in Jackson Heights, was married, lived there with her husband and 2 young children. And her parents as well lived in Jackson Heights. They were elderly people, and they had lived in Jackson Heights all their lives. And Claudia was a very talented gal, and we were talking to kids about it, and all the kids always asked us, whenever we said, what do you think about the history of Jackson Heights, a general idea? And the kids would say, oh, did we have dinosaurs? They always want to know about the dinosaurs, which suggested a title. And I came up with the title. And the title, I didn't have any idea about the whole book, but the title was going to be Jackson Heights from Ice Age to Space Age, a History for Children, to get the kids interested. So we then went out, and I got enlisted in the effort 2 professional commercial artists that lived in the neighborhood, a male and a female. Both are not married to each other, but they volunteered to do the illustrations for the book. And then I got good fortune to have a retired magazine publisher, a guy named Carson Scheidemann, who's a total gentleman and a scholarly guy, and he signed on to be a historian and fact researcher for the whole thing, for the whole project, and he was brilliant at it. And last but not least, I got a young lady called Sarah Reynolds, who was our neighbor, and Sarah was gifted in talent and spirit, both. And she was an art director. She was a professional art director for Dutton Children's Books. So she was custom made to be the art director for this book, and she took it on as a project. And that was a real home run because she really knew what she was doing. And she had designed the aforementioned adult history that Dan Karatzis wrote, and she did a beautiful job of it, an absolutely beautiful job. The book was so beautiful. It was the introduction was written by the world-class architect Robert A.M. Stern, and it was funded by the Beautification Group with our money and a handsome grant from the prestigious J.M. Kaplan Fund because the book looked so good. So Sarah signed on, and I was really happy about that. Well, that's all well and good to get the the group together. But of course, along the way, there are always bumps in the road. And the first bump in the road was Claudia as an author. After a couple of months, all she had to show for it was one half of the first chapter. And I said, well, what's the problem? She said, well, I have a husband, I have 2 kids, and I have a full-time job teaching elementary school in the neighborhood. And it's a really hard thing. I really can't have the time. I don't have the time to get to this with all those other obligations. And I knew that was true. So I said, okay, I'll tell you what, I can do this. And I kept her on as co-author of the book because she was a great help. She suggested, first of all, that we target the book and write it at a 4th grade reading level, because she said in 4th grade, the New York City syllabus first introduces civics into the subjects to be taught to the children. And she said at 4th grade, it can be read down, which means the teachers of the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st grade could read a 4th grade level book to their children in the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st grade, and they would have a full comprehension of what went on because it was being read to them or read down. So that was a great idea, and it so happened that was a blessed idea because my writing ability is at about the same level as the 4th grade students' reading level. So it was a perfect match. It took me 2.5 weeks to write 9.5 chapters. But it took 2.5 years then to get the money. That's another story. So I spoke to Sarah, and another bump in the road came about when the 2 commercial artists had to back out of the project almost simultaneously because they were overwhelmed with their own professional demands and they couldn't do it. And I was disappointed, and I got that news, and it came on a Saturday morning, just as I was leaving to spend the weekend with my wife out in the East End of Long Island with some friends. And in the car on the way out, I started thinking out loud and talking to my wife. And I said, I'm so disappointed to lose these people. They're good people. But, New York has a lot of art schools. I mean, we have world famous art schools. There's the Art Students League, Parsons School of Design, there's the Visual Arts, there's all of these different places. Maybe I could approach some students to do the illustration. And thinking about students, I kept thinking and tossing it around in my mind. And I said, wait a minute, maybe I can ask the elementary school students in our district to illustrate this book. And I thought that was a great idea, but I didn't know if it would be feasible. So I called Sarah up and I said, Sarah, can we do this? Can we get the little kids in grammar school in our neighborhood to do the illustrations? She said, yeah, on certain conditions. You have to give them very strict limits. You have to tell them the size and the format. It's going to be a rectangle. It's going to be a square. It's going to be so big, what the dimensions are, what you expect to be the content, what's the subject matter. You have to give them teachers. You have to find good teachers who can elicit the art from the kids and carry out the assignment, and tell them what you want in the picture. And I spoke to Claudia about it. I said, Claudia, do you know teachers? She says, Rudy, I know teachers in every school, or if I don't know them directly, I know them indirectly from some of their colleagues. And she says, some teachers are very, very good at eliciting art from children, and others are not. And even the art teachers are not necessarily good at eliciting art. Somebody else might be good, but I can find out who they are with my contacts in the other schools. And she did, and she served a very, very valuable purpose in the outcome. The results was spectacular. We gave out assignments, age appropriate, to different schools and different grades, to different teachers who we selected through Claudia's intercession. And we ended up with hundreds of drawings in submissions, drawings and some paintings as well. And this is a good time to tell you about the best one. One of the schools that we assigned a project to was the Hebrew Academy of Western Queens. We have public, private, and parochial schools in Queens, and we spread the assignments out among all of them. And the Hebrew Academy of Western Queens was run by a Rabbi Starr, and his wife was like the chief administrative officer there. He was the academic chief, and Mrs. Starr ran the place administratively. And I spoke to her, and I said, look, we want to give this assignment to your little ones, It's a chapter on immigration, and I need a drawing, a picture, a rendition of immigrants arriving in New York Harbor. Maybe they have the Statue of Liberty or Ellis Island or the skyscrapers or the Brooklyn Bridge, something. They're coming by boat to Ellis Island or arriving in New York Harbor. She said, all right, I get the idea, and I gave her the dimensions. She said, but we have a small school. We don't have a lot of kids like the private, like the public schools. She said, but let me submit this with your permission to the whole school and see what kind of submissions we get from all the grades, and let's just see what happens and see how we end up. I said, that's not a problem. She said, how much time do I have? I said, well, how about a month? Is that enough? She said, that's more than enough. She said, I'll call you when I have all the drawings, and you can come and pick them up. A couple of weeks later, 3 weeks or so, she calls me up. She says, come, I have the stuff. She says, and I have the best one, which I think is obviously the best one, but I don't know if you can use it. But you be the judge when you come and see it, and we'll talk about it. So I showed up, and she had a whole handful of drawings, probably 30 or so, from the kids, and one was better than the other, but one of them was clearly the best one. And she handed it to me, and it was a crayon drawing of an immigrant on a ship arriving in New York on the water with the Statue of Liberty in the background. And it was submitted by a little third grade girl of Russian origin. She was an immigrant, the kid, a Russian Jewish kid who had come to Jackson Heights with her family. And in red crayon, she put a title at the top of the drawing, and it said, "The First Jew to Come to America." And underneath that was the drawing, the Statue of Liberty, and there was a boat. And the boat was very much, it was reminiscent of the Nina, the Pinta, or the Santa Maria, which you saw Columbus arrive on, and it was a wooden ship with a prow and a stick in the front at the bow, and then a raised deck at the front of the ship, and then it was indented in the middle, and there was a cabin, and then the back, the aft deck was also raised up. And the problem was that this ship didn't have any sails, but it did have two exhaust pipes with black puffs of smoke coming out of the two exhaust pipes. And on the foredeck, right at the front of the ship, there was a figure of a man who was balanced very much with his arms spread out, very much like a surfer on a surfboard trying to hold his balance. And there he was on the foredeck of the ship, balanced. And this guy's wearing a black yarmulke, and he's got payas, which are unshorn sideburns that Orthodox Jews wear. They don't cut their hair, and they wear these long, long sideburns. And the sideburns are blowing backwards, straight back in the wind. But this guy is facing into the wind on the motorboat. And it was hilarious. It was absolutely delightful. But she was right. It was the best one, but we couldn't use it. It's not something we're going to use. I didn't want to get into that whole possibility. But anyway, we formed, I convened a blue ribbon panel in Jackson Heights. We got the local clergy, rabbis, priests, ministers, nuns. We had some local artists from the Jackson Heights Art Club, and we had some teachers and some community leaders. And we did a blind selection. Nobody knew who the artist was who drew the pictures. They just saw the pictures, and it wasn't revealed. And the results were amazingly fortuitous, because it came out that we ended up with probably 20-some-odd drawings of all the different subjects, and they were delightful. Not only that, the artists were totally representative of the most diverse neighborhood that we have. Our zip code in Jackson Heights is arguably the most diverse zip code in the most diverse county, in the most diverse city, the most diverse state, and the most diverse country in the world. I mean, it's a real all-American place when you think about it. We have so many people from hundreds of different countries, almost 200. And in any event, it was represented. We had all races and religions and age group. And then a friend of mine suggested something even good, which was a real plus for the book. He said, why don't you, when you publish the book, get a headshot, a little headshot, black and white headshot of the winning artist, the kids, and underneath them you list their name, school, and their grade. And that will attract kids because kids will look at them and compare the drawings and the grades and the ages of the kids and stuff. And that will get the kids' interest too. And competing as we do in this day and age with so much visual content on the internet and everywhere else on television, that was a godsend. It's a real thing. The book works like a charm. When you go and you show this to any kid to look at it, immediately they get sucked in, and their interest goes to seeing who did the drawings and what grade they were in, and they're comparing themselves against and their ability against what they see on the page. And the drawings were delightful. Well, that's all well and good. Meanwhile, how are we going to get this book printed? And how are we going to raise the money? And that was difficult. As I said, it took 2.5 weeks to write, but it took 2.5 years to get the money. And we got the money almost indirectly, almost by accident. The beautification group and myself were annoyed with NYNEX, who was the predecessor to Verizon telephone company. And they had, this pre-cell phone days, don't forget, in the early 90s, they had installed an excessive amount of payphones around the neighborhood. And the payphones were a problem in multiple ways. First of all, as street furniture, they were graffiti magnets, and all the graffiti artists came out and smeared these things up with name tags and all ugly stuff, and they were real eyesores. Second of all, the drug dealers were using them for their business, and we didn't want to encourage that or help that along. And third was very creative. There were telephone scam artists who, with stolen credit cards, would arrange through word of mouth meetings at various phones at various times where people would call their home countries unlimited for a $10 charge, a standing charge of $10, and they would use the phony credit cards or stolen credit cards or access cards to the payphones, and they would have Mexico days where everybody on the line would be Mexico and calling Mexico, China days, India days, Croatia days, you name it, and we had it, and it got to be a real nuisance. So I thought of an idea of a boycott of NYNEX, and we printed up a flyer. And people were incensed about all of this, and we printed up a flyer, and it said, boycott NYNEX until they remove the excess payphones. And on such and such a day, nobody in Jackson Heights who wants to participate in this boycott should use their phone, and we should go silent. A speech is silver for NYNEX, silence is golden for Jackson Heights. That was our catchphrase. And the thing was very effective. We printed it up, we distributed it with like a month's notice. We said like in a month in advance, we're going to have the boycott day, the day of silence. Well, NYNEX got wind of this and they got a flyer and they got alarmed. They didn't want this idea to spread around. It wasn't a good idea. It was bad for their public image and community relations. And they contacted us and said, can we sit down and talk and maybe we can work out a solution? To which we were very receptive. I sat down with a couple of other people and from our community and a couple of people from the community relations branch of NYNEX, the corporate people who were in charge of community relations. And we told them our problems, and they told us what their outlook was. And in the end, we worked out an agreement where they removed pretty much 90% of the phones that they had installed. It was very effective. And we reached an agreement. And it was very amicable and reasonable. And at the end, when it was all signed, sealed, and delivered, the head of the NYNEX delegation from their community relations people said, you know, dealing with you folks was a pleasure because we run into a lot of antagonism and a lot of unreasonable people and hostility. And this wasn't anything like this. This was intelligent and reasonable and quite acceptable and pleasant even. Is there anything we can do for your organization in the way of showing our gratitude for how you conducted yourselves? And I said, yeah, by the way, we're trying to raise money for a book, for a children's book. And they said, what, do we have anything to look at? I said, yeah. And I said, give me what you have. And I had like a draft of a galley and some of the drawings. And I gave it to him. He said, give me a couple of weeks and I'll get back to you. Well, he called me back in about 10 days. He said, come and meet me for a cup of coffee. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I want to give you your galley back. And I have a check for you. And he gave me a check for $5,000. And we needed $10,000 altogether. But with that $5,000 check from NYNEX, we broke the ice. Now, corporations are very, very conservative. They don't want to get involved in anything that's controversial or negative or anything like that that's going to reflect badly on them. And they didn't have anything, in all fairness, to look at. All they had was my word that this was going to be okay. And maybe, the galleys, which was shaping up and it started to look nice, but still, it wasn't a finished product. But now we had 9X on board with a check. And that gave other corporations and other people a clear shot, a clear field to operate and to take a chance. They gave them some confirmation. If it was good enough for 9X, well, maybe it could be good enough for them. One of the ladies, the head of the community board, said, we have a new Boulevard Watch Corporation sold their corporate headquarters to a private developer. They moved, and this guy is starting what is known as a Boulevard Corporate Center, where he's going to have offices and restaurants and meeting places and everything else. And he's trying to make nice with the community. He wants to establish a good relationship with the community and establish a profile in the community. And he's got a few tenants, and he would like to talk to you about maybe a donation for the book if you'd go and meet him and show him what you have. So I did. I was very appreciative. I went up, I spoke with the guy. And he said, okay, he says, I have a couple of new tenants that we're not fully, not even close to fully occupied yet. We just started. He said, but I have some tenants here. And let me talk to a couple of people that I have, and I'll get back to you in a few days, which he did. Called me back in a week or so. And he said, if you come up, he says, I have 3 checks for you. I said, fine. And sure enough, I went up, and he gave me a check from Boulevard Corporate Center. He gave me another check from Sanus Healthcare. It was a healthcare organization provider. And he gave me from a new startup in his corporate center, brand new offices, a $500 check from Bernard L. Madoff Securities. And I took it, and I didn't know who Bernard L. Madoff was, and I was thankful to have the check. And we took those checks, and then we went to Citibank, and they funded the rest of it. And they were so happy with the project when we printed it that they funded it 3 more printings by themselves, which was rare. They don't keep doing the same thing more than once because they want to spread the money around. But they really, really identified with this project. It had a lot of merit, and they enjoyed it. And we gave out 1,500 copies, free copies, every year to every 4th grader in every public, private, and parochial school in Jackson Heights. And it became part of the curriculum for all the kids. And I used to distribute it myself. We had boxes of these books. We printed 10,000 each printing. And I would go with Claudia's elderly father, Erwin Solomon. We used to call him Sonny. That was his nickname. And Sonny would ride shotgun in my car, and we'd go and distribute it to all the schools what they needed, covering every 4th grader and every teacher from 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st grade, and a couple for the librarian and a couple for the principal. And we give them out every year. And that was very, very successful. The book is a raging success. And today, the books are given out at public events in Jackson Heights. You go to the park and any events the beautification group runs, cleanups or town halls or parades, what have you, a Halloween parade. And we give the book out to all the kids free of charge in Jackson Heights. And the book has been a boon to the neighborhood. And all the kids grow up knowing about the community. So in the final analysis, the book has been an unqualified success in every way. And I like to think that I had a hand in getting the infamous and notorious Bernie Madoff to do a good deed, hopefully with his own money. Thanks for listening. Come back next week for another episode of Uncommon Law, lessons they don't teach in law school. I'm Judge Rudy Greco. Court is adjourned.